Welcome to The Explainer, where we take complex topics and, well, make them clear. Simple as that.
You ever just look around at everything going on and think, what is happening here? It's a question we've all asked, right? Well, today we're going to dive into the story of an ancient prophet who dared to ask God that exact same question, and his journey is one that still has so much to say to us.
So meet Habakkuk, and get this, his name literally means to embrace or to wrestle. I mean, how perfect is that? Because that's exactly what this guy does. He's this incredible example of a man whose honest, gut-wrenching doubt actually becomes the very foundation for a faith that's totally unshakable.
All right, so let's set the scene. Our story kicks off in a world that feels like it's about to just fall apart. It's teetering on the edge of chaos. And Habakkuk, he's not some distant observer. No, he's right in the thick of it. And he is just burdened by all the injustice he sees everywhere he looks. And to really get why he's so worried, you've got to understand the world he's living in. We're talking the late 7th century BC. His home nation, Judah, is basically stuck between a rock and a hard place. You've got the old Assyrian Empire crumbling on one side, and this new, absolutely ruthless Babylonian Empire rising up on the other. It's a really dangerous time.
And if you think things were bad on the outside, well, inside his own country, they weren't much better. And this is what's so interesting. On the surface, it looked like they were having this big religious revival, but that was just a thin veneer. Underneath it all, society was completely fractured. We're talking deep-seated violence, corruption. Justice was a joke.
So what does Habakkuk do? He does something pretty radical. See, most prophets, their job was to speak God's word to the people. But Habakkuk, he flips the script. He turns right around and takes the people's pain, their confusion, their anger, and he speaks it directly to God. He's lodging a formal complaint right at the top.
So the big question is, what happens when you actually demand an answer from God? For Habakkuk, let's just say the answer he got was way more terrifying than the silence he'd been dealing with.
So God finally answers, and his plan is, well, it's a shocker. He basically says, I'm about to use the Babylonians, the Chaldeans, this famously brutal pagan empire, as my instrument of judgment against my own people.
And let me be clear, this wasn't going to be some gentle slap on the wrist. The Babylonians were the new superpower on the block, and they were known for being unbelievably brutal. So think about it from Habakkuk's perspective. God's solution to the problem of injustice was to bring in an even bigger, more violent injustice. It makes no sense.
Okay, so this is where the real wrestling match begins. I mean, that shocking answer just throws Habakkuk into an even deeper crisis of faith. And that leads him to his second question, which is even more profound and way more challenging. He basically says, whoa, hold on a second, God. I thought you were holy. You're supposed to be just. So how in the world can your solution to a wicked nation be to use an even more wicked nation to punish them? It doesn't add up. And that right there, that's the absolute heart of his struggle. He's trying to square these two things that just don't fit. On one hand, God's perfect, holy character, and on the other, this divine plan that seems, well, anything but perfect. How can a good God use such a terrible instrument for his purposes? But here's where it gets really interesting. Instead of just giving up and walking away in despair, Habakkuk actually digs in. He says, nope, I'm not going anywhere. He plants himself like a watchman on a tower, and he's just determined to stand there and wait until he gets a better answer. And God's second answer? It's not a simple, neat little explanation. It's way bigger than that. It's a fundamental shift in perspective, a paradigm shift that honestly changes everything. Not just for Habakkuk, but for all of history to come. Because here's the punchline, God doesn't give him a detailed flowchart of the plan. He doesn't explain all the geopolitical ins and outs. Instead, he gives him a principle to live by, a call to trust his character and his timing, even when, especially when, his actions seem completely beyond our understanding. And this just perfectly lays out the journey God is inviting Habakkuk on. And really, it's a journey for all of us. It's not about just getting an answer to a question. It's about a process that completely transforms you from the inside out. You can literally see the progression here. It all starts with worry, right? That honest, heavy burden. But the key is, he doesn't stay stuck there. He makes a choice to watch, to actively, intentionally look for what God is doing. And that watching leads to waiting. And we're not talking about passive, twiddling your thumbs waiting. This is active, faithful expectation. And what's the final destination of all that? Worship. So that brings us to the incredible final chapter. This is where we see how that intense, honest, back-and-forth dialogue with God completely, radically transformed Habakkuk's entire perspective and brought him to that final, amazing place of worship.
Now you have to get this. Nothing about Habakkuk's situation changed. Not one thing. The brutal Babylonian invasion? Yeah, that's still on the horizon. But he changed. His heart did a complete 180. He moves from all that questioning and fear to a place of triumphant, almost defiant joy.
He literally paints a picture of the absolute worst-case scenario. He's like, even if the fig trees have no figs and the vines have no grapes, even if the sheep pens are empty, he's describing total economic and agricultural collapse. Everything you rely on to survive, just gone. And in the face of that, he makes this absolutely stunning declaration.
You see that massive shift? His joy isn't tied to his circumstances anymore. It doesn't matter if the fig tree has fruit on it or not. His joy is now anchored in something that can't be shaken, the unchanging character of God himself.
And that, right there, is the ultimate takeaway from his entire journey. The prayer, the honest wrestling, it didn't change the situation. The invasion was still coming, but it had the power to change the one who was praying. It completely transformed the prophet, anchoring his soul right before the storm hit.
So in the end, the story of this man who lived over 2,600 years ago leaves us with a really powerful question for our own lives today. It shows us that real faith isn't about having no questions. It's about having the courage to wrestle with them. So, the question for us is, can our biggest, most honest questions actually become the source of our strongest faith?